Now, it's been called a national scandal. Housing developers selling leasehold to investment firms without always telling homeowners and leaving them liable to extra costs. Ben has been talking about this throughout the morning.
Yes, he has. Today, the government is announcing a consultation which could ban leaseholds on nearly all new-build houses in England. I'm really glad to say, actually, because we've been talking about him all day. The Community Secretary, Sajid Javid, joins us now from our Westminster studio. Morning. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good morning,
and I've read your piece in one of the newspapers this morning. You do have some sort of really stark examples about what's going on. How has this been allowed to happen?
Well, this has really taken off in the last few years, particularly in the northwest of England. And just to be clear what we're talking about, these aren't flats. I think everyone understands when you buy a flat, you've got shared spaces, while leasehold is often the right answer, but obviously leasehold on fair terms. But these are houses that are being built and then sold to people as leasehold, and I can see no good reason for that. Last year there were some 10,000 houses we estimate sold in that way, and frankly I just think it's unfair. Enough is enough, and we need to crack down on this. So
you're issuing this consultation. Are you talking about an actual ban on these leaseholds, these new ones, on new houses?
Yes, I am. A ban on the future sale of leasehold houses, unless in the most exceptional circumstances. So you might have, for example, let's say it's land that's owned by the National Trust or the Crown Estate, so land of that type that can only have properties that are leasehold. But those would be very rare cases. But what we've seen is a wholesale practice here. If you take parts of sort of Cheshire and Greater Manchester, almost there's some developments there that are almost all entirely leasehold houses. And when you explore this, you look at it in the detail, there's no good reason. And then what makes it worse is that often those come attached with ground rent clauses that see an ever escalating rent increase. In some cases, in many cases actually, I've seen they can go up from, say, they start at something that sounds reasonable, a couple of £100 a year, and then within 30 to 40 years, it's £10,000 a year.
What are you going to do about those people that you've talked about just then, people sort of locked into existing leaseholds? How are you going to stop them? How are you going to protect them?
Look, that's clearly an issue as well. We do want to look at that, and that's why it's part of the consultation. I mean, one thing I want to happen immediately, even before the government takes any kind of legislative action, is that I want all those house builders out there, those that consider themselves responsible, to consider what they're going to do. We've already seen from Taylor Wimpey, one of those big house builders, that have said, you know what, we shouldn't have done some of this in the past. We realise there's issues, and they've set aside £130 million to help some of those customers. Now, there are other developers that could do the same thing if they wanted to. The next thing I want to do is look at what we can do to strengthen the consumer rights, the right of redress of people in existing leases. And, I don't sit here today, I don't pretend I've got the answer to all these problems. They are complex, but part of the reason of having this consultation, speaking to your viewers and anyone that responds to this consultation is to come forward to me with your ideas, and we will also see if we can incorporate that.
So it could be retrospective?
Well, we want to. I don't want to prejudge the consultation. That will be wrong. We've set out a number of ideas from us, and certainly I would want to take a number of those forward, as many as I can. But I also want to hear other people's ideas, because this has really taken off over the last few years, and there are some experiences of customers that I know about. For example, I've heard of one where we've got the evidence where someone bought a property, they wanted to make a small alteration to their property, and they were asked to pay £1,500, and when they asked, they were then told, well, you don't own this property, and clearly that's wrong. It's not acceptable. So part of the reason of consulting on this is to give everyone an opportunity to tell us what more can be done.
Can I also just briefly talk to you about Grenfell, because we know there is the second community consultation meeting tonight. People are still clearly very concerned about what has happened, what is happening. How are you going to win over the trust of the community?
Well, what you've just said there, it is all about winning trust and earning it. It'd be no surprise to anyone, for perfect understandable reasons. The reputation of the council, the local council, is very, very low, and it is not trusted today by the community. I myself, obviously representing the government, have been doing everything that I can to try and build that trust, and I've met with many of the survivors myself at these community meetings, many of them one-on-one. And to start with, one of the first things I always do is take my time with them and listen to what's happened to them, not just on that awful night and after that, but also the build-up, how the whole situation. And we've been very clear that for me, in my department, one of my absolute priorities is to do everything we can to help the victims, the survivors, and that is whether it's housing, it's with mental health care, it's with anything that they need. And we will continue to do that, not just for weeks and months. This is something that for me, it's going to go on for years.
And has all cladding been tested?
Cladding in terms of social homes, they've all of them have been tested, bar 4 that we are still waiting for samples to come in.
Why are you waiting?
Because the people that own those properties, they haven't sent the samples in. And last week it was 7, and since then it's gone down to 4. But we've been very clear to them. We've been in touch. To be very clear on this, these are properties that are managed by housing associations, all 4 of these, but they are not owned by them, so it would be unfair to sort of tarnish their housing associations with this. They are trying with us to get those samples, but as yet we are still waiting for 4 out of about roughly 200 to come in.
Are you frustrated by that?
I am very frustrated, and what I said last week is that I hope that the message I gave in Parliament would make it very clear. And on these 4, we're now looking to see what action we can take. I hope it doesn't come to that, but it is important. I've been very clear from day one. If there's any building in the country that is owned by local authorities, housing associations, that has cladding that may be similar to that on Grenfell Tower, it has to be tested. We don't want you, the owner, to tell us what you think that cladding is. That's not good enough. We need to test it, and we need to satisfy ourselves. Now, the good news is, virtually in the last few weeks, we've got the samples from almost every single one of those buildings, bar those 4, and it's not acceptable. And if the owners of those buildings are listening, then they really don't have much time left to send in those samples, otherwise we will have to take action.
Sajid Javid, Community Secretary, thanks for your time on Breakfast this morning.
Thank you.